recognizes the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, the Inlandia region is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, and we express our gratitude to them for allowing us the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. So, tonight we are here to celebrate the launch of Inlandia's latest publication. It is a long time coming. I have been privileged to be working with Ellen on this and with our staff for what feels like an eternity, but really it's not that long. It's just typical book production time, but here we are. I mean, it went like that, and now we've got this beautiful book. So I've had the privilege of knowing Ellen since the earliest days of Inlandia. She's been with us, participating in workshops and committees. She's been on the advisory council. She's been a member of our board and is currently a board member emerita. And all this time, secretly, she has been working on this memoir. So, not so secretly in recent times, but at the beginning I had no idea that you were a writer. So you're here. So I'm just really pleased and thrilled for my friend Ellen. And so at this time I want to turn it over to her to tell us all about the book and her journey. Welcome, Ellen.
Yeah, I'm so excited that this is my first book and it's being published by Inlandia, an organization that I absolutely love and it's a big part of my life. Can you hear me?
Can you make it louder?
Lovely. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's resonant now. Yes. So this is the angle. Okay. It's going to be hard to keep this up, but I can do it. Anyway, I always say this, and you've heard it before, I'm sorry, but it's really important to me to say that just about the time I decided to become a writer, I quit my job as an arts administrator, Inlandia came into being. First as kind of an idea, an advisory committee, and then a board of directors. And it's been invaluable to me as a writer to have this community. I'm so grateful for it. And I'm so grateful that you're all here too, that Inlandia brought us all together. All of these old friends and some new friends too. So I am very excited to share this book with you. A writer would write about something like Iran. You think, well, it would be nice if Iran were in the news. Well, sadly, Iran is in the news in so many ways. One good piece of news, though, is that Narges Mohammadi, the activist who's been fighting for women's rights in Iran for 30 years, won the Nobel Peace Prize. That's something to celebrate. The bad news is, yes. The bad news is she's still in jail. And doesn't look like she's going to get out anytime soon. She's 8 years into a 10-year sentence. She has been convicted of crimes against the state, totaling about 30 years of sentencing. And, lots of torture and a lot of bad things. And she hasn't seen her family for many, many years. Also, Iran is in the news because of its role in the current strife in Israel and Gaza. So these are very tenuous times. The book that I've written is really about the period, the 10-year period from 1971 to 1980, 9-year period. The events leading up to our family story set against all those events leading up to the revolution and the Islamic State, the Islamic Republic of Iran. And then basically we were there for a year after the revolution, and how we decided to come back. So I'm going to read you the first chapter and give you a sense of the scope of the book, I think. The first chapter is Memoir of Iran, July 29th, 1980. Look who's leaving, look who's staying, Ahmad says. It's 4 a.m., and my husband's younger brother is hunched over the steering wheel of our old Hakon, driving us through deserted Tehran streets to Mehrabad Airport. Ali sits stiffly in the shotgun seat. I'm in the back with a sleepy girl on either side, and both with dark brown braids. Our daughter Sarah, 5 years old, rests her head on my lap. Her older sister Sanira is staring straight ahead into the darkness. Today is her 7th birthday. In the trunk are 4 suitcases, 1 per person, all that we are allowed to take. Our leaving is just temporary, we tell ourselves. Who else is left? The Shah of Iran, for one. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi left 559 days ago, ending his 37-year reign on the peacock throne. Although few Iranians had held out any hope that his absence would be temporary, it is definitely permanent now. He died 2 days ago in Cairo. Many of our friends had been gone for months. There were no goodbye parties, just a gradual drifting away. Colleagues had left the country as casually as they would leave for a conference or a vacation, but we know they're not coming back. And who's staying? Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who arrived from exile in Paris just 17 days after his followers helped to oust his archenemy, the Shah. And the American embassy personnel, who were taken hostage by militant Islamic students 271 days ago. They're staying too. We are on the Parkway, the modern highway the Shah had built for the 1969 Asian trade fair. I first traveled this road when I arrived in Iran in September 1971. Ali's good friends Mahmoud and Naeem Fedai picked us up in Mehrabad Airport. The Shah's lavish celebration of 2,500 years of Iranian monarchy was in full swing, and the parkway was ablaze with colored lights. Not really understanding how Mahmoud and his fellow drivers kept from crashing into each other, I held Ali's hand in a death grip, kept my eyes on the lights, and avoided looking at traffic. Look, Ellen, Mahmoud said, gesturing at the dazzling display. This is all for you. Look who's leaving and look who's staying, Ellen mutters under his breath to no one in particular. This isn't right. It wasn't right. We resisted leaving. After almost 9 years in Tehran, we were entrenched, engulfed by Ali's large family, and enmeshed in our university jobs, our apartment with a mortgage, and the lives of good friends we planned to grow old with. But the Islamic Republic had made us feel like strangers in our own home. The university had become highly politicized. We watched as old friends and colleagues segregated themselves into factions: Islamic fundamentalists, monarchists, leftists, and secular humanist Democrats. The taking of the American embassy had solidified the mullah's position, and many people were only too eager to distance themselves from Americans and Darzadeh, the West toxified Iranian intellectuals. Of course, many hadn't distanced themselves, like Salman, the corner grocer. His shop was tiny, maybe 300 square feet at the most, with barely enough room for him and his assistant, let alone the 2 or 3 customers who could squeeze in between the counter and the bits of lentils, yellow split peas, and rice. The arrangement of his wares defied logic. The walls were lined to the ceiling with a haphazard assortment of pineapple compote, tomato paste, hand soap, and mayonnaise. The window display was a dusty collection of plastic colanders, fly swatters, and flashlights. I would sell one's almond for a customer. I think he liked me because I had bothered to learn Persian. He also seemed to appreciate my childishly scrawled Persian shopping lists. So even when there were shortages, and there were many, he managed to set something aside for me, a few eggs or a small box of laundry detergent. If other people were in the store, he would scratch his stubble ear and say, "Nah, we're out of detergent today." But he would fix his gaze at me just a second longer than necessary and raise one eyebrow almost imperceptibly. I would know then that I should come back when the other customers had gone, and he would have ready a small box of Tide neatly wrapped in brown paper. But as anti-American sentiment increased, others had become less accepting. The usually friendly woman across the street suddenly stopped returning my salam. And one day, when I called the butane gas company to order another canister for the stove, the agent taking my order interrupted me to ask, "Connor, are you a foreigner?" "Why do you want to know?" I demanded in Persian. He explained that he was asking only because so many of his foreign customers had been leaving, and he wanted to see which of his accounts were going to be closed. That was a plausible answer, but still, he knew where we lived. We arrived at Mehrabad Airport a little after 4 a.m. We'll meet Essie and Julie there, then travel on separate planes to Zurich, Switzerland. We'll need to pick up our Iranian passports at the airport police station. Travelers leaving the country are required to submit their passports to the airlines 48 hours ahead of departure. The airlines turn them over to the airport police, who then check to see if any holds have been placed on the documents. We have our Swiss Air tickets to Zurich, but our American airline tickets to Washington, D.C. will be waiting for us on the plane. The Swiss embassy has finessed that. But first, our bags must be inspected. After 9 years in a country, what do you take with you when you are allowed only one bag? Well, if the country is the Islamic Republic of Iran, you certainly don't take money, gold, or valuable antiques. We had seen too many nightly news broadcasts featuring people caught spiriting valuables, their own possessions, out of the country. The culprits stared sheepishly into the television lights as the camera panned over the loot, elaborate gold jewelry, candelabras, stacks of foreign currency. These enemies of the state were then led away to jail to await trial. Officially, no one was executed for trying to abscond with his own valuables, but the regime was busy cleaning house. Her German friend Krista, who lived in the village of Evin, in the foothills just north of Tehran, told us of lying in bed at night hearing the executioner's rifle shots ringing out from nearby Evin prison. In news photographs taken just minutes before their executions, the hapless men all had the same wry, ironic look of resignation. Rumpled and unshaven, they sat alone in their stark cells and stared, half smiling at the camera lens, as if remembering long ago family gatherings when they had joked with the photographer. "Wait, Mr. Photo, let me put on some cologne first. Please, just one more, Mr. Photo." So we were careful. Not that we had much in the way of elaborate gold jewelry or other questionable booty, but we took the line of least resistance and packed family photographs and too many soon-to-be outgrown children's clothes. My wedding dress and audio tapes of Iranian classical 70s American pop music. Ali packed his chromosomes. Well, pictures of them, at least. Tucked in among the reprints of scientific articles he had published over the previous 10 years were the tangible evidence of his work. Stacks of 8 by 10-inch black and white glossies of safflower, sunflower, saffron, and cumin chromosomes in various stations of cell division, coming together and separating like courtly dancers in some cellular gavotte. However, as cautious as our packing strategy was, even we tempted fate, just a little. We were allowed to take only 500 per adult, a sum that would diminish quickly in Zurich, one of the most expensive cities in Europe, Before we left the apartment that morning, I carefully folded 2 $100 bills and put them in the toe of my right shoe. It is 6:30 in the morning now, and we find the line for the baggage checkpoint. As we watch the security personnel rifle through the bags of the sleepy travelers in front of us, we grow increasingly apprehensive. Apart from 2 sweaty $100 bills, we have no contraband. But somehow that doesn't matter. We feel guilty nonetheless. How much longer, Mommy? Asks Senator, who is gripping my hand tightly. Sorry, her arm around my leg is whimpering softly, only just now realizing that she has neglected to retrieve one of her favorite dolls before we locked up the storeroom. It's finally our turn at the baggage checkpoint. We heave our suitcases onto the inspection table. Without so much as a salam, the bearded official, his collarless shirt buttoned up to his chin, opens each one. I cringe as his calloused hands skim over the linings, dart into side pockets, explore every shoe, and turn over every piece of underwear. You touch those sanitary napkins, buddy, I think to myself, and they're yours. I make a mental note to do laundry at the hotel. Then he finds Ali's chromosomes. Squinting, he turns one of the cell division photographs this way and that, first holding it at arm's length, then his glasses raised to his forehead, slowly bringing it within an inch of his face. He looks at Ali and he takes another page from the sheet of glossies, then another and another. Clearly he is trying to get some sense of perspective, scale. Are those Quonset huts in the middle of the desert? They could be aerial shots of, yes, perhaps a military installation. Then he starts pulling negatives. Out of their translucent paper sleeves, holding them up to the light, peering at rows of roof tip cells looking for all the world like stacks of missiles. They're chromosomes, Ali explains. Huh? Chromosomes. DNA. The baggage checker's eyes narrow. He stuffs the photos and negatives back in their folders, slams shut the last of the suitcases, scrawls a large X on each one with indelible felt pen, and throws them onto the baggage cart. You can go, he says. His eyes follow us, yet another Arabzadeh, West-stricken intellectual university professor and his American wife preparing to leave the Islamic Republic of Iran. Good riddance. Free of our bags, and relieved to have passed that hurdle, we make our way to the airport police station where we find Essie and Julie and their 2 girls in the waiting area. Mona, age 9, is bouncing around on the seat, brushing her yellow ringlets out of her eyes as she relates the plot of a book she has been reading. Ida, age 4, a red-haired, pink-cheeked cream puff, begins flirting with Ali, with great success. It is Julie's birthday as well, and she and Sam exchange good wishes. We'll celebrate tonight in Zurich, Julie tells her. We compare notes. Essie gets fared less well with the baggage checker. He tells us that when the agent searched his luggage, he got suspicious about some boxes of histological slides and confiscated several prized samples of rat and hedgehog brain tissue. We all regroup in preparation for the next stage of our departure, the retrieval of our Iranian passports. The children are on my passport. Even in the Shah's era, a woman needed her husband's consent each time she wanted to leave the country. However, as soon as we arrived in Tehran in 1971, Ali wrote a letter to the authorities giving me permanent permission to leave the country anytime I wanted. He also made sure to deposit half of his paycheck in my bank account so that I would always have access to funds if we were away. Of course, that permission letter was just insurance. I never wanted to leave the country without him. Judy and I attended the children as Ali and Essie give all of our names to the officer behind the counter. He hands Essie his wife and children's passports and gives the girls and mine to Ali. Then he disappears into an adjoining room to look for Ali and Essie's passports. He comes back empty-handed, except for 2 official-looking envelopes that he hands to them. Ali is very quiet. I move over to the counter and stand next to him as the officer reads through the huge ledger with neatly handwritten entries. "You're on the list, sir," he says to Ali. "Okay, that's great," I say. Ali is very pale. He doesn't look at me as he says, "That's the Memoir of Iran list. Memoir of Iran, Exit Prohibited." "There must be some mistake," Ali says. "We have letters from the university allowing us to leave." "No, sir," the officer replies, "there's no mistake. I cannot move. I cannot hear. The clamor of the airport is just white noise. All around me, people are busily gathering their children, their bags, their last-minute gifts. They head toward the departure lounge, calling out to children to hurry up, negotiating the cumbersome packed sacks of pistachios and sweets that well-meaning relatives have pressed into their hands at the last minute. I hear nothing, see nothing except Ali, who with one fluid motion spins away from the counter, opens his briefcase and begins taking out documents. "Okay, here are your passports and the Swiss air tickets," he says, pressing them into my hand. "What do you mean?" I ask him. "You can't be serious. We can't go without you." "You can't stay here," he says. "You and the girls have to get out of here." "But when will we see you again?" I says. "I'll join you as soon as I can," he answers impatiently. "What's in that envelope?" I ask him. "Why is this happening?" "It's a letter from the Prime Minister's office," he explains. "Essie and I have to go there now to find out why we're not in the Kourouj." I'm suddenly aware of Samira and Sarah standing next to us, their eyes filling with tears. Just over Ali's shoulder, I see Essie talking to Julie, his arms folded tightly across her chest, her eyes trained on the floor, listening. Essie comes over to us. "Ali John," he says, using a term of endearment for family and close friends. "Let's try to retrieve our luggage and get everybody home. We can sort this out later." Ali puts his hand on Essie's shoulder. "Listen, Essie John," he says in measured tones. "You and I need to focus on getting our exit visas. It's better for our wives and children to be safely out of here. Give Julie tickets and put your family on that plane. Because the sight of her hair or her ankles may arouse men. Where male and female university students will be separated. Where doctors may not examine patients of the opposite sex. It is acceptable for both sexes to use the same restroom." I decide to wait for Swiss Air. Ali walks us to the checkpoint near the departure lounge. Samir and Sarah are sobbing now, loud, choking themselves. We say goodbye to him and watch as he turns and disappears down the concourse and out into the morning sunlight. I used to enjoy Memoir. Memoir means place of kindness. Before the children were born, Ali and I would go there sometimes in the evening to drink Nescafe and watch people. Being there made me feel so cosmopolitan, so grown up. I especially loved watching families with their shared features and mannerisms. I would try to figure out their relationships and ethnicities and guess at their professions and destinations. I would sit across from Ali in the busy airport cafe, grateful for his kindness and for this gift he had given me. The opportunity to know a different culture and a different side of myself, to inhabit two worlds at once. Place of kindness. This morning, Mehrban has nothing to do with kindness. So that's chapter 1. So, goes on in the sunlight and as he goes to the Prime Minister's office and like Ali. And begins, a very long process to find out why he has been prohibited from leaving and who accused him, what he's accused of and who accused him. I, on the other hand, took the children, met up with children in Zurich and began my process of figuring out how did we get to this point and what did we miss? What blind spots did we have? Why was this such a big surprise? Because we all knew that our husbands hadn't done anything criminal. We knew that. So, I began, and I guess it took several decades, really, before I started writing this book, to think about all those years in Iran, and what my view of it was, and then what other people's view of me was, for example. So you have to kind of reassess. I think people write memoirs because they want to make sense of all the stories. They want to make it coherent. So I'm hoping that I did that. But I'm still exploring this, even as we speak. For those of you following along in your books, I'm going to read next from chapter 17. And that's on page 177 if you want to follow along. So the book, then jumps back in a series of flashbacks and eventually makes it to the present time. This is chapter 17, Shaw Lorenz is the Whole World. Claremont, October 1971. And I should say that my husband, who is from Claremont, we were there visiting his family. In those first days in Claremont, I was continuously on display. At dinner parties, I was fussed over and coddled. Much was made of my attempts at rudimentary questions. Oh, cute. Or my long hair, just like Iranian. The family, eager to know me and ensure my comfort, was genuinely interested in my reactions to even the most inconsequential occurrences. And Ali was kept busy translating my every response. Does Ellen like yogurt? Then why isn't she eating it? Doesn't she like sugar with her tea? Then how come she takes only one cue? What does she think of the charcoal? How does she like filling it? Sitting on the floor. Iranian food. Sleeping on the floor in the same room with so many people. So one afternoon after our siesta, yearning for some time out of the spotlight, I found a quiet place where I wouldn't have to have an opinion. I settled into some cushions at the back of the hall where all 5 Rez's and Porat's children, aged 4 to 9, were watching cartoons on television. Hall here is just like a family room. Beside the few cushions, the room was bare except for a red and blue flowered Claremont carpet that skirted the edges of the thick whitewashed walls, and the television, a large console placed at the far end of the room, opposite the door leading to the courtyard. A single naked bulb hung from the vaulted ceiling. Sitting in a half circle on the floor in front of me, the children shyly acknowledged my presence before returning their attention to the screen. Programming on the 2 state-run channels was limited to a few hours a day, mostly in the late afternoon and evening. Large portions of the daily newscasts were devoted to the comings and goings of the glamorous royal family. In addition to Iranian sitcoms and variety shows, the government imported American programs like Star Trek, Bonanza, Peyton Place, Perry Mason, and Mission Impossible. Milky black and white reruns of the soap opera Days of Our Lives, several years old and dubbed into Persian, were popular primetime fare. As dull as it was, Days of Our Lives provided me with many random but potentially useful phrases, such as Nikki Abine, Nikki you sterile, that I would mumble to myself until I got them right. But my favorite source for new Persian vocabulary was the endless stream of television commercials, to which I accorded the same respect and attention as the programs they were sponsoring. Mine was a natural reaction to a compelling medium. In 1969, the creators of Sesame Street revolutionized children's programming when they adapted the format of television commercials to teach children letters and numbers. They recognized that commercials are the perfect vehicle for language acquisition. With their catchy, repetitive jingles and concentrated messages tailored to short attention spans, they engage the language learner, be it a preschooler just beginning to talk, or an adult immigrant eager to master the idiom of her new language. Paying on every syllable, attuned to every nuance of intonation or gesture, I was the advertiser's ideal audience. Baked pens, Toshiba rice cookers, Piff Puff, insect repellent, Bach air freshener. I could have been a credible spokesperson for any one of them. Random bits of pipe lodged in my brain and found their way to my conversations at odd moments. While Sosa Max tous on the beach, I proudly announced one day as I handed Ali a sandwich slathered with Yakovlev's special sandwich sauce. When a clearly surprised Ali abandoned his sandwich to give me a congratulatory kiss, I knew I was onto something. I found that television commercials were also great bellwethers of social change. As much as I loved Iranian art and history, folk culture and handicrafts, I was intrigued when I saw East and West bump up against each other. Elaborate Louis XV furniture in the sitting room of an otherwise traditional home, melamine dishes with ancient Persian designs, a portrait of John F. Kennedy rendered in a Persian carpet, and cabarets featuring belly dancing and bottles of Johnny Walker on the tables, frequented by families and women in Western-style dress as well as chadors. Sometimes these cultural collisions had unsettling effects. Never was that more apparent than in the ubiquitous commercial for Charles Lauren's televisions. I had seen it several times a day in the 5 weeks we had been in Tehran. And there it was again that day in Reza Foran's living room. The children were as entranced as I was, even though they must have seen it hundreds of times. The ad featured a middle-aged man and his attractive, much younger wife. He was the classic jawhead, a member of the urban lower classes and a staple of Iranian popular culture, a distant cousin of the rural American redneck. While the word jahil translates as ignorant, the jahil himself is frequently thought of as the salt of the earth, generous and friendly, and endearingly uncomplicated innocent. The paunchy and mustachioed husband was dressed in a black suit, with a white shirt open at the collar and a too small black hat pushed on his balding head. His wife, clad not in the traditional chador but in a dressing gown, sported a bouffant hairdo and fashionably feline eye makeup. In a sing-song rhyme with a heavy Esfahani accent, she berated her husband for not providing her with enough entertainment. Didn't you say that you were taking to the beach? Take me here and there? Just as she said, take me to the beach, she flung open her dressing gown to reveal a two-piece swimsuit. Immediately, the 5 little heads in front of me whipped around, and 5 pairs of big brown eyes locked with mine. Those eyes told me that once again, they wanted to know exactly what I thought. I smiled at them, surprised by this sudden attention. Seeing that I wasn't shocked, I just as quickly turned back to the TV. Still, I wasn't exactly sure what I thought about this commercial. I wasn't shocked, but I was perplexed. Clearly, the husband had his hands full with this woman. Playing upon the time-honored international stereotype of the materialistic nagging wife, the ad seemed to suggest that buying her a television would make her forget all about an expensive trip to the seaside and skimpy swimwear. In fact, in his Esfahani accent, the husband tells her somebody who has a husband, has children, doesn't go here and there, doesn't go to the beach. If our Esfahan is half the world, Charles Lauren's itself is the whole world. But who was this audience? Who was the audience for this message? What did the average Iranian think of it? And who was the average Iranian anyway? Was this swimsuit really a sign that Iranians had become so westernized that this commercial was acceptable to the masses? Or were they scandalized by it? And did they really want the whole world? The commercial had been airing for several months, but it was still provocative, especially to these children who had never seen any of their relatives in a swimsuit. It had been almost 36 years since the late Reza Shah, the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty, and the current Shah's father. had outlawed wearing the chador and headscarves in public. This edict, brutally enforced by the police, was intended to speed the country's modernization. In the late 1930s, women venturing out wearing hijab were attacked, and their offensive coverings were confiscated. The chador was now optional. After the Allies engineered the abdication of his father in 1941, Mohammad Reza Shah allowed women to once again take up the chador. But 30 years later, my sister-in-law Puran, like millions of Iranian women, would never leave the house without one, let alone wear a swimsuit, even at home. Certainly, most Iranian women did not aspire to be that woman in a skimpy suit. They may have wanted her television, but not her swimwear. The Jahel, like millions of his traditional-minded countrymen, was caught in a conundrum. By allowing television into his living room, he was affording his family cheap entertainment within the safe confines of his home. But he was also opening the door to a host of foreign influences, both positive and negative, that undermined his control. He would forego the seaside only to be inundated by a tidal wave of unfamiliar attitudes, fashions, and moral ambiguities. Iranians had a long history of adapting to foreign conquests and influence built while maintaining ancient customs. Years later, with this in mind, one of his colleagues at the Institute would point to an Iranian travel poster on the wall of the faculty lounge. "Welcoming visitors for 2,500 years, proclaimed the poster. Yes, the colleague laughingly agreed. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, the Arab hordes would welcome them all. And they had survived them, in part because of the ability to live and let live, to embrace the positive aspects of a new culture and ignore the bad. Since the Industrial Revolution, Iranians had mimicked the West in commerce and education. Using sexy bathing suits to sell German televisions to conservative chadori's was just one more seemingly pragmatic accommodation. I found the cross-cultural pollination of 1970s Iran a charming and reassuring sign of an inevitable surge toward modernity. But I was unaware of the depth of the growing discontent among traditional and devoutly religious conservatives. I brushed aside fleeting glimpses of social and religious resistance. Jahels staring, deep-mouthed at me because I dared to go without the job. Or the wife of my husband's friend who objected to paying for an American guest's wine at a restaurant. This intransigence will work itself out, I told myself. It had nothing to do with me. But 9 years later, the beaches of the Caspian seaside resorts would be segregated. On their side of long dividing curtains, women would swim in street clothes and chadors. Bathing suits would become only one of many casualties of the culture wars that were just now escalating. How are we doing on time? Do we have time for another?
Yeah, I think you do, yes. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. So, when you're ready.
So let's jump ahead. For those of you who followed along, page 301. This is chapter 27. It's called Wind Catchers, Flag Catchers. Tehran, 1977, 1978. In late 1977, almost 2 years before the Iranian Revolution, I completed my master's degree in English literature at Tehran University. A few months later, I was hired at the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art as manager of education services. The museum, a project of Empress Farah, had opened a month or so earlier to great fanfare, both for its exquisite architecture and for its spectacular collection of European, American, and Iranian modern art. It soon became a new center for contemporary Iranian artists, but what some welcomed as progress, others saw as a threat. The Empress had hired her cousin, architect Kamran Adibal, to design the building, which abounded with references to traditional Persian architectural forms, especially the bagir, or windcatcher. Traditional bagirs, which I had seen in the desert town of Yazd, channeled breezes down into the house where they were cooled by an indoor pool. But here, they were transformed into light catchers that helped illuminate the galleries. A central ramp of gleaming polished concrete wound down through the center of the museum and ended in a lower level atrium with a hose, a rectangular reflecting pool. Not of water, but of oil. Devon had commissioned this black pool, Matter and Mind, by Japanese artist Noriyuki Haraguchi, for the new museum an obvious reference not only to the hose of traditional Iranian architecture, but also to the oil that fueled Iran's economy and ultimately funded the museum. David Galloway, the museum's first curator, was an American art critic based in Germany, who had been tapped by the Empress to help build the museum's collection and organize major shows of European and American art. The Empress charged Americans Galloway and Donna Stein and Debo, who was also the museum's first director, with putting the collection together. In a few months, they amassed what would become the largest collection of late 19th and 20th century Western art outside the West, with impressive works representative of the major art movements. The museum's 5,000 square meters also afforded generous space to Iranian artists such as Nasser Ovisi, Parviz Tanavouri, and Parviz Kalamtari. But while the architecture was informed by traditional Iran, the collection was predominantly Western. I loved working in that building with its spiraling rhythm, its light, its energy. Each day I sailed up and down the winding ramp, making friends with the Van Goghs, Giacomettis, Picassos, and Morals. I took restorative breaks in the galleries or wandered in the sculpture garden outside my office window. I felt lucky to work in a museum where two cultures coexisted so amicably, or so I thought. I answered a phone call one day from an Iranian woman who wanted some information about current exhibits. Before hanging up, she asked, "Is this a museum for foreigners?" "Not at all," I answered her. I assured her, "It's for Iranians. This is your house." The museum did belong to the people, but in reality it housed two cultures existing side by side. It was not just a matter of Iranian artists sharing space on the walls with their European and American counterparts. It was also the museum's Western-educated administrative and curatorial staff, working among the more traditional and religious support staff. Soon I would see that, for those in the latter group, the museum in its current form would never be their house. In the early summer of 1978, I was helping organize a reception at the museum that would feature the Danish ambassador. As did all our receptions, this one would include alcohol. In fact, beer and wine had always been available in the museum's cafeteria. Weeks before the event, I made sure that two of the women who worked in the cafeteria would be on hand to help serve at the reception. But just a few hours before the guests were to arrive, one of these ladies asked to speak to me. "Ellen Estilai," she whispered nervously, adjusting her headscarf. "I'm willing to work tonight, but I can't serve alcohol." "Why not?" I asked. "My son has forbidden it." "I don't understand. You've been serving beer and wine in the cafeteria all these months." "Yes, I know, but my son won't let me do that anymore." "Oh, and my friend won't be serving alcohol either." I looked over at her friend, also wearing a headscarf, standing off to the side and watching this exchange. Both women were polite and respectful as always, but now they were displaying a newfound power and resolve. Clearly, in their minds, they had just scored a small victory for Islam over the infidels at the museum. I knew that it was pointless to argue with them. No reasoning about the lateness of the hour would dissuade them from upholding their Islamic principles. I thanked them for letting me know their position and quickly set about finding others to take their place. This defection had caught me off guard. I could no longer assume a benign disinterest on the part of the janitors, guards, and support staff. They were watching and judging and making choices. Suddenly, I saw the museum from their perspective. The provocative images, the hijab female employees, the nodding to architectural traditions while dismissing others. A place seemingly at odds with their values and culture. My temporary staffing problems would soon prove to be the harbinger of more dissatisfaction to come. A few weeks later, another event occurred that made me see just how myopic we all had been. Sometime in 1978, before he returned to Germany, David Galloway had produced a rich and innovative catalog to accompany a large show of cutting-edge and contemporary art, the Book of the Art of Artist Books. Hundreds of copies of the thick catalog were produced in Germany at considerable expense. Shortly after the catalogs arrived, my boss, an American in his mid-50s, burst into my office, red-faced, frenetic, and brandishing a matte knife. "Where is your copy of the new catalog?" "Well, it's not here. I took it home to read." "Well, I need it back," he shouted. "Now." "Okay, but why?" "Just look," he said, as he opened his copy and thrust it in my face. I stared at it for a second, horrified, and then burst out laughing. There in the middle of the book, low on the page near the inner margin, was a small black and white photograph of two men engaging in oral sex. Whose idea was this? I asked. What were they thinking? "I don't know," he replied, "but I need to cut out all these pages, hundreds of them." He snatched back his copy and, clutching his matte knife, disappeared in search of the rest of the abandoned pages. I don't know if the photo was the choice of Galloway or his graphic designer, whether the curator had seen it or if it was simply someone else's last-minute addition to the layout. But clearly, its inclusion indicated someone's ignorance of the prevailing mores of the country, or at least an inability to understand that these mores were relevant to this museum. Outside of a small group of avant-garde intellectuals and aesthetes in major intellectual centers of art, where would this catalog photograph have been acceptable? Most likely not in many government-sponsored museums around the world, and certainly not in Iran. The public never saw the effect page, but as it turned out, there still was much in the museum that wasn't acceptable to a growing number of dissatisfied and disaffected Iranians. Later that fall, one of the museum staff found a note stuck in a frame of Tom Russellman's Great American Nude, a painting of a big, blousy blonde whose most predominant feature was bright pink nipples. The note said, "Next time, this will be a bomb."
Thank you, Ellen. That was amazing. I imagine we might have some questions from our audience. So raise your hand and I'll go around with the microphone. Who wants to go?
Thank you. I really enjoyed the reading. Thank you for sharing that beautiful book with us. Question is, how many years did you live in Iran? And can you talk to us a little bit about the period that you experienced in the years you were living in Iran?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of the question.
Can you share with us the periods that you were there? Was it were they different? Did you see any differences when you arrived to Iran versus when you left?
Oh, yes, right, very good. Yes, we were married in 1970 in California, Gates, California, and then in 1971, fall of 1971, we went to Iran. We moved to Iran. And this is my husband right here. Right? That's the Ali. Because he's read every word of this book like numerous times. As have my daughters, Sarah and Sarah. We arrived in Iran in the fall. And then we went on sabbatical to Davis again. When we were married, we went to school at Davis. And that was in 1978, 79. And that was the time when Iran was in great turmoil. And we watched, it isn't true, the revolution will be televised. We watched the revolution, happen on TV. Of course, it was much worse having to live through it there, obviously, but we agonized about whether to go back or not, because there we were safe and sound, and yet our lives were in Tehran. Our house, our jobs, and everything. So we thought, well, we can't just tell from television whether we can really get something that we can. So we're going to have to go there and see. And we went, and we were there for a year, and it was probably, I think, the worst year of our lives. Yeah. So when we left in July 29th, 1980. That was Sammy's birthday. And yes, things had changed a great deal. A great deal, yes. Because the Islamic Republic was in power at that point.
When you got married, how did your family respond to you moving to?
Oh, that was interesting. They thought it would be a great adventure for me. They were very supportive of that. And and my father had a little bit of wanderlust. And I think he always wanted me to see the world and experience the cultures. And then even after the revolution happened, and we were in Iran trying to figure out whether to go back or not. I asked everybody, friends and dental hygienists, and we kind of asked people, we would say, crazy to go back. But then my father said, well, I will take care of it. I'm sure it's going to be okay. Yes.
Yes, Ellen. I'd like to know how you were received as an American, and what was the American sentiment in Iran during the period that you write about?
How I was received in Iran by Iranians.
Yes.
What was the American sentiment?
Yes.
On the part of Americans?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
What did they think about us? Are you in other words,
Was there an Iranian prejudice against Americans? Yes, that's what I mentioned during the period that she writes about.
I think that in the beginning there was much less. I personally, I had many Iranian friends, and I felt that I worked there. I had both my children there. I had this huge family of Estilais that welcomed me, and that was really important. I didn't have a strife that some American women have when they marry into an Iranian family, and maybe the mother-in-law doesn't like them. Or in my book, I talk about one of my friends says that another American Italian woman, she was a doctor, but everybody in the family was inspired to do 6 of marriage, even the maid. So I didn't have that problem. I think because I tried so hard to learn the language and to learn the culture, that helped me do my house. Is that all? Well, let's remember that. Yeah, that's okay. Sorry about that. We were in this space before, and the lights kept turning off, so let me know if you can hear me. So, what did the Americans think of Iran?
in some countries, they say, Yankee, go home.
Yeah.
That type of thing. That's what I'm wanting to know from during this period that you write about. What did they think of it?
Well, I think that in the beginning, in 1971, there was still, there were always leftists who who resented the influence that the United States and Western countries have on the politics of Iran. And certainly, since 1953, when the U.S. and Britain ousted the democratically elected Prime Minister Mossadegh, that was hard for them to swallow. That is something that still fueled the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the memory of that. But personally, I didn't find that I was discriminated against. I think Iranians have, at that time, at the beginning, they could see the difference between people's governments and people themselves, which is always a good distinction to make.
Okay, I see another hand.
Ellen, are you still there? I was very interested in asking you, Ellen, about the art you chose. Oops. The art you chose for the cover of the book.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I was so lucky to find that.
Tell me about it. Tell us about it.
Okay. Well, Katie sent me a link to some websites that had
Back up though, because you wanted miniatures, Persian miniatures.
yes.
And I think we were having trouble finding art we were having trouble finding an artist who we could actually contact to request usage. So we had to go to a website that had some that were in the public domain.
In the public domain. It's like I really wanted it to be an Iranian artist. But so many of the Iranian artists that I was looking at lived in Iran, and I didn't want to ask them to use their images because I was afraid they would get in trouble. So we found somebody who would not get in trouble because this painting was made in 1630. So bless his heart, Reza Abbasi, the painter. I didn't really know much about him before, but I wanted to know so much more. I just love him. I just love his work.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on in the.
Well, the painting is titled Two Lovers,
Okay.
and
That makes sense.
and I got the idea of tearing that image because they're separated, and we were separated from each other for that time. So, yeah.
So the tear wasn't part of the original image. That was something that was Ellen's idea, that our graphic designer. That was.
Mark Gibbons was the graphic designer. I think Carlos has it. Carlos.
Okay.
Ellen, when I read your manuscript, one of the things that you kind of alluded to in your first reading of your first chapter, I was crushed by the number of decisions you had to make. And you mentioned too, what do you pack in one suitcase and a year? So going back, is there any decision that you made that you might make differently today, looking back? Either you or Ollie on this. Now in retrospect, I'm just sort of interested because we all of us in life sometimes say, gee, I wish I made another decision. I'm just wondering about that with you.
Well, I definitely would have packed better about the convention. But are you saying about, in a broader sense, in my day-to-day life, the way I approached Iran?
More of the choices you had once you found that trajectory you were on that separated the two of you, starting at the airport. Is there something you might have done differently now in retrospect?
I don't remember having too much choice at that point. Because we had to get on that plane. And it was kind of set for me. And I knew that I was going to go to see my sister. And there were choices whether to stay in the Washington, D.C. area or whether to go back to California. I think we made the right choice. Yeah.
Everybody in the back needs to see.
Ellen, how did, how does the time you left and the circumstances under which you left and later your husband joined you, how did that affect communication with family in Iran?
Well, first of all, they were very, very worried about us. And then, we would call them from California and talk to them, and we still, they're guilty. That I was out, they were dealing with that government and that oppression.
Did it affect how you talked to them? In other words, were you worried about conversation or mail being looked at?
Yes.
So you might not say it exactly like you wanted to say it?
Right, and that's, of course, still exists today.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
I'm curious, you described the terrible circumstances at the airport where you were separated from Ali. I assume that you didn't know at that time whether he would be able to join you at all.
Absolutely, yeah.
So my question is, how long were you separated at that time, and how long were you in a state of simply not knowing whether he would be able to join you at all?
About 70 days.
An eternity.
Yes, yeah, it is. And he was very, very lucky to get out when he did, because the Israelis bombed American. I'm so sorry. The Iraqis bombed the Mehrabad airport just a week after he left. So he could have been there much longer.
With your experience, I know.
You gotta do this.
I know you experienced bad things and good things. You suffered a lot and you enjoyed and learned a lot. When you look back, have you ever regretted marrying a foreign man? Thank in all that experience, do you encourage and recommend mixed marriage?
Yes, why not? Because I've always felt that the political situation was external to our relationship.
Yeah. Writing this book, this is a story of very many of us in Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Back here.
Back here. Okay.
Thanks so much for the reading. The first chapter really intrigues me. You suggest that you were in some serious danger if you had packed the wrong things.
Yes.
The mention of execution squads is a little stunning, but I didn't sense that you were afraid in what you were reading or how you read it while you were at the airport.
Well, we thought we were going to get on that plane. We thought we followed all the rules. We had carefully packed, and we saw no reason why anybody would stop us.
I have a funny question, which you could just simply dodge if you want. It's a historical one. I got an impression of Iran years ago, and I read Memoir of Iran, I think Memoir of Iran, the Persian boy.
The Persian boy, it is Memoir of Iran. Yeah.
And I was curious, is there any sense, or to what degree does modern Iran relate to that? Or are those just two totally different, socially, psychologically, I mean, obviously mechanics, the outside world has changed, but is there any relationship between the film she made and the world you saw?
Between what Mary Renault was writing about, well, she's writing about Alexander the Great.
Right.
And this Persian boy. And, I thought about that book, and it's been many decades since I read that book, so I'm not really up on it, but
It had a view of Iran,
yes,
that seemed to be vaguely related to what was in the news when I read it, which was
it seems, I'm sorry,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get back in. And that was what made me ask the question was, when I read the book, which is probably what you did, a long time ago, that it kind of seemed to me to relate to the picture of Iran that we were getting in the popular media. And I don't know whether, well, Mary Renault was a well-read woman. She could have found parallels herself, or the parallels could have been totally in my head. And I just was curious, is there anything to that?
I'm going to now have to go back and reread that book. I really don't know. Sorry. It's an interesting theory, though.
Okay. Any other hands? Looking around.
Yeah.
All the way back. And
Hi, Megan. Hi, Zach.
My question is, when you think of joy while you were living in Iran, what picture comes to mind?
When I think of
Joy.
joy,
Yes.
when I think of joy,
Proper joy.
Yeah, what brought you joy? Like maybe a memory or a moment where you felt like, probably I assume with your family or something that was a moment that still brings you joy to look back on, even though there were rough times between now and then.
so many things. First of all, family, just being enveloped in that family. Visits to Isfahan and the Shah Bus Hotel, and walking along the river. I don't know, just seeing him looking at my kids. That brought me joy there, obviously. And just learning a new language, learning a new culture, being in the kitchen with my sisters-in-law, learning how to cook Persian food. I had the best teachers. So they were just amazing things, amazing people. Oh, yes. And he says, how about the gift from my father? Well, there is a chapter in there, in the book, about the samovar that my father-in-law found in the dusty reaches of the storeroom, dusted it off and gave it to me. And it was an old samovar from 1870 from Russia. And I just felt that when he gave that to me, he was really welcoming me into the family. So I think you might have seen a picture of it.
Oh, yes.
Judith.
Okay, so I've known Ellen since about 2006, when you first started thinking about this book.
Exactly.
And what always took me about it, well, was first of all the romance of the relationship with me and how it all got started and so on. But that the book to me was more about becoming immersed in the Iranian culture.
Yes.
So I would say when I would read some of it that I was that I could see it and touch it and smell it and taste it. And so I think it's more to me like a story of living in this culture, becoming part of it, less than a political story.
Yes.
So it's sort of like we are living as Americans, and there's all this political stuff going on, this or that, the other thing. But we're living our lives. And so what I loved about it most was learning the hospitality and welcome and, just getting immersed in the culture. Yeah.
Thank you, Judith. When I wrote the book, I was hoping that anybody who's ever been a foreigner anywhere would be able to feel what I felt. And anybody who's never been a foreigner anywhere would maybe want to be one. Maybe want to put yourself out there and do that.
And John, we are really proud of you. And we've been waiting for this book for years. I was self-debating right now that if I should give this comment right now, because the question was asked from Ellen. And one of our friends asked, how Iranian people were receptive when Ellen went to Iran at that time, 1970s. And I want to tell you why, because I am an Iranian who was there at the time, and I was a student at the university that Ali was a professor, Ali was my professor actually. So Ellen was the wife of the American wife of a professor who came to Iran. So even though I'm not a representative of Iranian people, but I can tell you at that time, with her environment, we were the closest actually to be there. And I can tell you for sure that we all, me, myself, and the other students, we all loved her. She's lovely. It's not only me, but what I wanted to say that at the same time we had other professors with American wives. Of course, our attitude, we were not resentful to any of them, but we actually loved some of them over the others. What I would like to tell you is that in my experience, we've been living in different parts of the world. I think it is the people, it is the person that goes there. It doesn't matter where we come from. Even today, with all this propaganda, if you, for example, go to Iran, I have no doubt that they would not be resentful to you. They did not like the American policy. You may not like the Iranian policy, but not the people. This is my experience. I just wanted to share.
Well, that might be a good place for us to leave off, because it comes down to the people. And I think how much we embrace the culture that we are immersed in. So, Ellen, it is truly a wonderful book, and this is a testament to all the love that you have engendered amongst all of your friends and family. I want to allow enough time in case there are any more books back there. We have a few more, okay? And to have some snacks and to have Ellen sign your book. So, I realize also, I never said who I was, in case anybody doesn't know me. I'm Katie Porter. I'm with Inlandia Institute. For those of you who this is unfamiliar to, we are the publisher of her wonderful book. So please have at it and have a great night.